people. Thank you for watching again. And it's rather different tonight. Instead of having an academic on a subject of scientific or social importance, we have an entertainer. We have, from Hawk Nelson, the front man, rock star, Jon Steingard.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, it's fine here. How the devil are you, John?
I'm doing great. You can see behind me. There's some work going on in this room. This used to be my office, and now my kids are taking it over. So you've got a little washing machine right there, the back of a piano because we're busting a hole in a wall, and we got to keep the kids from coming through here. So
yeah.
I'm coming from you from a construction zone, basically.
Yeah. Well, at least you're not in the conflagration zone, which is happening in some parts near you.
What is the conflagration zone?
Fire.
Oh yes, fire. Yeah. See, I'm not an academic. I just call fire.
But you've escaped that, or you were telling me there's smoke.
Yeah. So I live in San Diego. And there aren't any fires directly near my house, but just outside the window, I mean, we just see all the smoke from various fires, and it's sort of this. It creates this cloud cover that's like darker and weirder than normal cloud cover, and so you get this sort of like orange colored sun all day. Like it's like the sort of color of a sunset. You kind of get that all day, and it's really eerie and strange. Yeah.
There will be some people calling it the end times.
Oh yeah, I can't tell you how many. Every time something like this happens, people start saying stuff like that. Yeah.
Yes. It's true. Anyway, let's talk music, because although I'm nowhere near in your league, I did have a period in my life 30 years ago when I dabbled. I was in a semi-pro band that played at weekends. And I've got my guitar here to prove it.
Nice. Oh, yeah, there it is. The SG. I think we talked about that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah, it's got a Bixby on it. But
nice.
You've got to use that very gently. Otherwise, put it out of tune.
It'll go out of tune. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I can't play this anymore, of course, because if you don't touch it for 30 years, not only do you forget what you ever knew, but your skin goes all soft. And it hurts because the strings are so sharp.
Yeah, you sort of lose the calluses. Let's see if I can get the camera to see. That's
exactly.
I've kind of lost not much there in the way of callus, huh?
Yeah. And you get it on, if you do bars, you get it all the way down this finger.
Oh yeah. Well, we were sort of a punk band, so we just played power chords a lot. So the lazy chords.
Yeah. Well, it's power chords are so impressive, aren't they? And you really only need the bottom two strings to make it. Really...
Definitely, to make a punk song, you only need like two strings. That's the idea.
Yeah. But the thing about music is it's such a powerful medium, isn't it? I mean, some linguists suggest that we did music before we did speech.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that. I've studied the evolution of language a little bit here and there, but yeah, I hadn't heard that about music. That's really interesting.
Well, if you look back at something like the howler monkeys, for example, they communicate in a song, which of course birds do as well. So yeah. There's a definite possible evolutionary route there.
Yeah, and there's some indication that there's sort of rudimentary language among certain animals. Birds are a good example. Certain calls that have certain qualities can sort of indicate certain information, and it's sort of interesting that they've been able to evolve those sort of proto-linguistic abilities, I guess you'd call them.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, what that tells us is there's no gulf, there's no huge discontinuity between humans and the animals.
Right. That's one of the things that I've sort of been processing the last 6 months or a year. And it's sort of causing me to rethink. I mean, I've been recently approaching the topic of animal ethics, which isn't one that I've ever even really considered up until very recently.
Yeah, that's a growth area at the moment. People are getting into veganism and stuff, aren't they?
Yeah.
Anyway, I like your music. I will confess that I am a Hawk Nelson fan, and it's because, to me, proper music has the three elements. It's got rhythm, it's got melody, and it's got harmony or accompaniment. And of course, if it's a song, it also has lyrics as well. So I think that good music should have all of those four things. And once you take some of those ingredients away, you are looking at poorer music. Yeah. Which is why I'm not really a rap fan, because where's the melody? You know?
Yeah, that's true. I think there's something in hip hop music that resonates with people really deeply. And I mean, it is now the #1 most listened to form of music in the world. So it clearly is resonating with people on some level. And you know, I've thought about, you know, our roots as human beings and our evolution, and going, well, something about a beat combined with you know, something verbal. It's almost taking us back to basics in a way of what we would have had for a long time. So I don't know. I like hip hop though.
It's got the rhythm in the spoken word, hasn't it?
Yeah.
But no melody. It doesn't go up and down.
It's a gray area actually, because sometimes you get, you know, certain rappers that'll inject little bits of melody, and like a good example is Kanye West. He'll sort of like he'll rap something, but then he'll sort of go into a bit of melody for a period of time, and he'll almost be off key in a way that is sort of endearing. and it's all somehow better than if he was on key, and I can't totally wrap my head around that, but yeah.
How's his bid for president coming along?
I don't think it's going so great. I guess it depends on what his goals are. So if his goal is to stay in the news, then I think it's going quite well. Yes. Yeah.
It's an easy way of getting a headline.
I'm not sure it's easy, but it is a way of getting a headline. Yeah.
It's a way. Yeah. So the thing about a song, of course, is the message is in the lyrics. And to an extent, you've already been hooked by the actual musicality of the song without needing to listen to the lyrics.
I think there's a certain amount of information that's communicated even before you get the lyrics. Like there's a sort of mood and a tone set by the music and the rhythm and stuff that I think does contain information of some kind.
Definitely. I guess toe tapping or something.
Yeah. Well, and even sort of it can get you into a certain frame of mind. So like definitely. I think Coldplay, you know, this is, you know, some good boys from your part of the world. They have a gift for communicating. Like one of the things about Coldplay is that they're one of the bands whose lyrics actually means very often not that much. Right? Like
who'd have thought you could write a song about yellow?
Right. And so I think so there's a method of songwriting, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's where you write lyrics that are designed to sing well, and that takes priority over what they actually mean. So there's a few bands that literally openly write music this way. So there's a Canadian band called I Mother Earth, and they openly say this is how they write music. They just put whatever words sing nicely, and they don't mean anything.
No. They're just looking for scansion and rhyme and sense. Sense doesn't enter into it. Yeah. Well, I'm sure that's used in a lot of places as well. But the other thing about music is it's universally communicative, but it doesn't really belong to anything. I mean, you can write music inspired by all sorts of activities. You can write music for war. Yeah. You can write it for love. You can write it for a belief. And this is what sometimes people try to do. They try to appropriate it because it's such a good vehicle and use it to propagandize their message. Do you see where I'm getting with that?
Yeah. I think that, I mean, cultural appropriation is something that's sort of in the dealing with what that means is something that's definitely in the zeitgeist right now.
It is. Yes.
I actually just last week, so I'm a filmmaker by trade now. Yeah. And last week I did a shoot that involved a Native American community. And they were discussing the difference between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation.
Yes.
And I was very interested in how they, what criteria they use to differentiate between those two things. And what they said is you have to look at the impact that it has on the community that originated a certain cultural practice. So with Native community, for instance, they would say, like if people are buying designs that are Native inspired, if you want to make sure you're not participating in cultural appropriation, you should investigate, those products and companies make them. Are they giving back to the Native community in some way, or are they supporting the Native community in some way? Are they hiring Native artisans to make their products? Like those kinds of things. And
negative.
Yeah. What is the impact on the culture that spawned the ideas? And I think that's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah. We had right up until the 1970s. I mean, I'm terribly old. You can tell that. I can remember back to the 1970s, as long as I don't drink too much beer.
Sure.
But we had this embarrassing show called The Black and White Minstrels. Where
I don't know it.
No, you don't want to know it.
Okay.
It was innocent at the time, but it consisted of singers who boot polished their face. And of course, you'll know about this from your Canadian Prime Minister's embarrassment.
Yes, unfortunately, that was not so good.
It was a thing, though, back in the 1970s.
Yes, it was.
People did it and didn't think too sense about it,
Yeah. Well, and I've even, after doing that shoot with this Native community last week, I was thinking about, when my wife and I were dating, maybe when we were just early married. I remember going to a Halloween party, and I was a cowboy and she was an Indian, and that was like a just culturally normal, acceptable thing we just didn't think about. And now I look back at that and go, oh, that wasn't great. Yeah. And we definitely would never do that now.
No.
So,
but you weren't out of step back then. I mean, what would happen to YMCA in this world of cultural difficulty?
Yeah, I think a lot of long established organizations are sort of rethinking things right now. And I'm not one for cancel culture where I think that we should just wipe the slate clean of anything we've ever had because it's, broken. I think that it's important with every establishment or every sort of cultural norm to look at it and go, hey, what's the good stuff here, and what's the stuff that maybe we could move beyond?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes there's this tendency to want to tear down everything and start over, and I don't know that that's productive. I think a more productive approach is to try and look at, and I look at religion this way actually, and I go like, what are the things that, obviously religion is providing something for people because it wouldn't be so prevalent in the world if it wasn't. So what are the things that it's doing well, and what are the things that maybe it's not doing so well, and maybe we can figure out ways to hold on to some of the good stuff and let go of some of the stuff that needs to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This is there's a bit of a conflict here with regard to war, because the one point of view is we should forget about it. Why do they keep dredging up? This is the 75th anniversary of the end of VE Day, and this is the 75th anniversary of VJ Day, and look at all the cenotaphs with the names of all the people who died. That's one view. But then the other view is we need to remember this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
How are we going to learn from our mistakes if we pretend it never happened?
Yeah, I tend to be in that camp. I think like when I studied the 20th century, there's some pretty horrifying things that I would prefer humanity never repeated. And it's important that we remember those things, not because we're glorifying them, but because we want to know that, you know, this is possible. Yeah. Us as human beings, we have this is the ability to go down that road is part of our nature. And it's important that we remember that, you know. Yeah. I've spent a lot of time reading about the Nazi concentration camps, and then the Soviet gulags. Yeah. And both are pretty horrifying examples of what humanity is capable of.
Yeah, yeah. So beware. We could go there again if we're not careful. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I didn't grow up, you know, I was born in 83. So I didn't grow up, you know, I wasn't even really aware of the Cold War, because that was sort of coming to an end as I was a child.
Yeah.
So I haven't lived under the existential threat of war, really, ever. So it's very easy for people in my position, my generation and younger, to feel like, oh, that stuff's never going to happen again, because it's never happened in our lifetime. But it's happened in our parents' and grandparents' lifetimes, and it's not that long ago. No. And to think that things can't go that way again, I think is a little naive. So
yeah, definitely. So before we get too morbid,
yeah, I know. I always take it there.
Let's talk about music again.
Sure.
Don't you love the dropout? You know, when the instruments take a rest and the vocals carry on, and maybe you get the audience clapping.
Sure. Yeah.
Then you bring the instruments back in. Why is that such a powerful effect? It's a bit of silence.
Yeah. I think it puts the focus back on people. And it clears everything else away. And on some level, it sort of reminds us that the human voice sometimes is enough. I guess that's sort of a philosophical way to look at it. Also, I mean, just from a purely musical point of view, it's like you have to be able to remove something in order to appreciate it when it comes back. So
yeah. And it's like the build at an intro. You start with the drums, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
The bass, stick in a guitar, put the keyboard. Yeah. These are all effects which, in the past, have been practiced, have been utilized by religions. I mean, I remember when I was a young person, the churches made use of the old-fashioned organ. Old, wheezy organ and a choir, and it was out of date then. But then slowly, the more modern churches, the evangelicals, came about, and they brought in a guitar and a drum kit and, you know, some girl singers. And
sure, yeah.
And suddenly everybody moved away. The old churches fell empty. And the new meeting places attracted everybody's attention because of music. You
largely,
you can use it as a force, as a magnet, to amplify whatever doctrine you want to proliferate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've wondered about that a lot because I've been, a part of music within Christianity for most of my adult life.
Mm.
And I remember actually we were, talking about Coldplay that
Yeah.
I remember going to a Coldplay concert and having some of the same sort of waves of emotion that I would have
Yes.
in like a worship service. And I remember thinking, that's interesting. Either I'm also experiencing God's presence here, or what I'm experiencing is not the presence of a God. What I'm experiencing is an emotional connection, feeling of connection. And yeah, that's one of the sort of experiential things that has over the years kind of got me wondering about, what these experiences are, at concerts or in worship services and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, music by bands like Coldplay are sort of a brain balm, aren't they? They sort of, they're not exactly hypnotic, because there are other bands that are hypnotic, but they're sort of soothing.
Yeah.
If you see what I mean.
Yeah. Well, and there's something transcendent about it. And it's sort of mysterious as to what that actually is.
Yeah. But if you went to another band, maybe Metallica or something, you might come out feeling angry.
You might, yeah. Uh-huh.
Mm.
Yeah, it definitely has the power to influence our emotions, for certain. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm going to play a bit of it now.
Sure. Okay.
Tell our audience who made that video, Jon.
That was the first music video I ever directed.
Well,
so
damn good for a first go, isn't it?
Oh, thanks. I had an idea and I brought on a few people to kind of help me bring it to life, and that was the beginning of a whole other career, actually, and that's what I do full time now.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because unless you become some sort of mega star in the music business, you're a bit like an athlete. You sort of peak young, and then you need a second career. Like an athlete would go into talking about athletics. They would become a commentator.
Or a coach, or
yeah. And you've done the switch from music career to video career.
Yeah, and actually the video thing started to come about before the music career was really winding down. We were still very active as a band, and I started doing this stuff on the side. And honestly, my wife and I having kids and starting a family really motivated me to start taking my life in a direction that was less oriented around touring so much. Because as a musician, I mean, right now during coronavirus, I mean, my friends that are musicians that rely on touring income, I just feel awful for them because they're really struggling. But that was the main way that we made a living in the band. So being able to do video work allowed me to have a little bit more control out of my schedule and my travel, and be able to be present with my wife and kids a little more, or a lot more, actually. And then coronavirus happened, and I'm very present now.
We're all locked down. We had restrictions reimposed here in the UK just today.
I saw that in the news. You went down to six people, right?
Yeah, that's right. The law of six.
Have cases been going up dramatically in the UK the last week or two?
Not dramatically, but up, definitely up. Not exponential, but the direction is where we don't want it to go.
Right. Well, you all, it seems, have done a much better job of dealing with this than we have over here.
We're not top of that league at all. There are other countries that have done better than us by far.
Yeah. I mean, I think New Zealand is a great example. They literally pretty much eradicated it.
Yes, they did. Yes. Well,
but it kind of makes you wonder, like, we are a global population, right? It makes me go, like, it makes me sort of wonder, like, what is New Zealand's plan? You can't stay isolated from the rest of the world forever, you know?
Well, they do have about 300 miles of sea, at least, all the way around them.
That's true. Yeah.
Thousands of miles on one side and about 300 miles on the Australia side.
Yeah.
But you're right, we're a global planet now, aren't we? Because my son, his wife, and my granddaughters live in New Zealand. So for their sake, I'm very glad that their country has managed to keep coronavirus out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us about your journey. Now, I know you originally were brought up in Canada, and I know that somewhere along the line, you became a Christian. Now, tell us about how you got into Christianity.
Sure. Well, yeah, I'm a pastor's kid, so my dad's a pastor. So definitely, I was raised in an environment where Christianity was the norm. Now, I was also raised in Canada, so Canada is a fairly secular society, much like the UK, where it's certainly not abnormal to be a Christian, but it's not assumed, right? And in many parts of the US, especially in the South, it's just sort of assumed. So yeah, definitely, I was raised in a very Christian environment within a more secular culture, and in the environment I was in, it was a very charismatic evangelical Christian faith. So, lots of music and dancing and waving flags and intercessory prayer, prophecy, praying for healing, signs and wonders. It was a very, it was a pretty charismatic environment for sure. And that was my childhood. And then I joined a band when I was 20 called Hawk Nelson, and that's the band we've been talking about. And we started touring in the US, and we were all from Christian upbringings in the band, and we all had Christian beliefs, but we weren't necessarily setting out to be a Christian band. We just sort of wanted to be, a band that was positive and could go and play for Christians, but also play for people in clubs and stuff like that. And just sort of, instead of specifically, being evangelical, we were just wanting to be sort of positive. So we did that. And over time, it just became apparent that the people we were resonating with the most were Christians. And so by nature of that, our content of our music definitely became more explicitly Christian over time.
Yeah, you have to give the audience what they want, don't you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I talk about this a lot where if you want to do music and you want to do whatever you want in music, and then that's fine as long as you don't desire to make a living from it. But as soon as you want to make a living from it, then what people want matters. And so you have to sort of find the overlap in the Venn diagram in a way, like between who I am and what I want to make, and who is my audience and what do they want to consume. And so you find that overlap, and that's kind of what you do. And for us, that involved a lot of content that was pretty explicitly Christian, as we much more so over time. And I became more and more involved with the writing of the music over time, and definitely began to, in searching for things to write about, I dove into theology and philosophy a little more, and I started to find that I didn't really have confidence that I believed what everyone around me in the Christian culture I was in believed. And some of that was experiential. Some of it was, certain events would happen and I would notice that I would feel one way, but the culture I was a part of would say something else. And some of it was more intellectual, where I would read some, whether it was a passage in the Bible that troubled me, or whether it was some ideas that maybe ran counter to Christianity that sort of made a lot of sense to me. And so between all of those things, it sort of led me to a place where I was like, I don't think I believe this. And it was a gradual realization for me. But eventually I felt like in order to be sort of honest, I had to say something publicly. And so I did that in May. I wrote a Instagram post and basically came out and said, here's some of the reasons I'm thinking this way. But basically the bottom line is I don't believe in God anymore. And I sort of thought that maybe would cause a few ripples in Christian music for a few days. And then I just sort of assumed everyone would move on, because I don't assume I'm the center of anyone's universe here. But about 4 or 5 days after I wrote that post, Fox News ran an article, and then CNN ran an article, and then New York Post and USA Today and Esquire and all these publications started writing articles about, Christian singer comes out and says he, doesn't believe in God anymore. And I totally had underestimated the degree to which that would be a meaningful thing for people, one way or another. Some people were horrified. Other people were grateful that I was willing to sort of make that statement.
Did you get any? You've got a youngster there. I've sent mine away.
Yes, that's my son. We're alive, honey.
Did you get any?
Okay, bud. I'll see you soon.
Did you get any serious pushback? I mean, you talked about that Venn diagram between you and the rest of the world, and you've got to get an overlap to have an audience who will pay you. But sometimes you get that Venn diagram within the band, don't you? You get musical differences, and I want to play more punky, I want to play more jazzy, I want to play more bop, whatever. Did you have that any when you declared that you were no longer a Christian? We had been having internal conversations in the band for some time, and also I had already told the guys that I wanted to move on from music and do other things. So we were already planning on sort of winding the band down, anyways. So it wasn't as difficult a sort of thing to approach as it would have been if we were still all active. Because certainly that would have been a disruptive thing to our career. Yes. But I do think that's an important thing to talk about, because I don't feel like I had the freedom to really explore my doubts and my questions until I had at least begun to move away from Christian music and had a career that didn't really require me to be a Christian. And as long as I was embedded in a Christian career, I really didn't have the freedom to ask those questions, Yeah. So I definitely feel empathy for people that are in careers that are sort of, whether it's a Christian a public figure or whether it's a pastor or something like that. Like there's very little room for them to ask questions and to have doubts. And so I feel tremendous empathy for people in those positions, because you're not left with a lot of good options, really. No. If you're someone, say a pastor, which I've spoken, in the last few months with pastors that are actively pastoring, and they don't really have a lot of other career options, and they want to feed their family, but they're secretly doubting. Yes. And I think that's a very tricky spot to be in, and I feel a lot of empathy for people in that position. Well, we've had to set up organizations to not exactly to rescue, but to certainly help some of these people, haven't we? Mm-hmm. There's the Clergy Project. I've heard of this. Yeah. I don't know a ton about it, but I've heard of it. It was set up, I think, by Dan Dennett and Dan Barker. You know of Dan Barker? Only recently became aware of Dan Barker because I saw him go on a show called Unbelievable, hosted by Justin Brierley, who's become a friend of mine. And I've been on Justin's show too. Oh, have you? Right on. Yeah. I think Justin's fantastic, and he's very professional, isn't he? Yeah. I know he's a Christian. He's a believer. Yes. But
he's been facilitating conversations between believers and non-believers for like 10 years.
Yes.
And that's something that has been sorely needed. And I think he does a tremendous job at it.
He does. It's not easy to chair opposite sides without siding with one or the other. And he manages to walk that tightrope.
He does very well. And I because I know him a little bit personally, and I've read his book. I'm familiar with his personal sort of views on things. But he does a very good job of making sure that both sides of any given discussion are being represented fairly.
Yes.
So I have a huge amount of respect for him.
So we were talking about Dan Barker, who is, like you, a musician of some accomplishment. He's written both Christian and non-Christian material, I think. He wrote some, what you might call, not exactly pantomimes, but Christmas theatrical production.
Oh, okay. Sure, yeah.
And they're very good.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm not familiar.
So here we have a question from one of our audience. You've more or less, well, you've started to answer this, haven't you? Because you didn't spring it on the band members, did you? You'd had discussions prior to your announcement.
Yeah. So I definitely had conversations with the guys before anything went public, and I had conversation with my family and my wife's family, and so there were definitely a lot of private conversations that preceded the public announcement. And I think for anyone who's in a similar position, I would definitely recommend having those private conversations first, because the last thing you want is for someone close to you to find out on Instagram that. So but within the band, I mean, the guys have been very, very kind, and they still believe, so they're in a different sort of philosophical space than I am. Yeah. But our friendship, I don't feel like has been hurt at all. I mean, they're incredibly kind to me. They released a statement after my Instagram post that was very supportive and kind, and I was grateful for that. And I mean, we still have a Hawk Nelson text message thread that every once in a while comes back to life, and we sort of send each other little messages and stuff.
Yeah. Great. So it's because you didn't do it as a bombshell, isn't it? It's because you yeah,
for the people that I'm close to, yes, it wasn't really a bombshell, but I'm quite sure it is for people I was maybe more loosely with. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're a pastor's son. So I don't know quite how to put this, but is your father still with us?
Oh yeah, yes, yeah. My dad is 66. Something like that.
You don't have to give that.
Oh yeah. No, but he doesn't care. But yeah, so they're still up in Canada. He's still pastoring. He's pastored a number of different churches up in Canada, and that's still his career. And we've definitely. I actually feel like in this process, I've ended up talking to my dad more than I used to, because we'll talk about philosophy, we'll talk about Christianity, we'll talk about biblical issues. Obviously, he's saddened to hear that I don't believe anymore, and the impact that it had on my parents was probably one of the most difficult aspects of this journey for me. Yeah. Because from their point of view, first off, they're on some level concerned for the sort of eternal destination of my soul, right? Yeah. And then also, it just grieves them that I've chosen to live believing something that, or not believing something that they believe to be true that's really consequential. And I think on some level, they ask themselves the question, what did we do wrong? Which you know, I have no desire for them to feel any of those things. So it makes me sad that my journey has made them sad, you know. But at the same time, I do feel like we're connecting on a deeper level because there's no pretense. You know, they know exactly where I'm at. We can have really hard but honest conversations where I feel like if I just lived the rest of my life sort of quietly disagreeing with them, I mean, I just don't think I would have. There would always be a barrier between us that we would never be fully connecting, and I just don't think that's the best way to live, you know?
No, indeed. But you're lucky because it's only because you're all such reasonable people you can carry on like this, because a lot of families, you would be ostracized. You would be drummed right out. Yeah. But I'm glad to hear that your father is still devout and has not gone through the emotional trauma that it must be of a priest or pastor who continues to go through the motions while having lost his own faith.
Yeah, no, my dad very genuinely and deeply believes, and you know, we're actually, one of the things we're planning on doing together is we, you know, when it's possible to travel again, we'd like to go to Israel together. And you know, because he wants to take me to a few of the places that are really consequential in the Bible, and you know, he's been to Israel twice, I think, and that's an experience that I'm very open to, because I would love to visit Israel in general, and then to have that experience with my dad. You know, my dad is not, you know, I think years ago I would have thought that late 60s is old, but I don't think that anymore, you know. It just doesn't seem that far away anymore. But I am conscious of the fact that I don't know how much time I have with my dad, and it's certainly finite. And it may be many, many years still, but you know, one of the consequences of this change of perspective that I've undergone is that I'm recognizing in a whole new way just how limited my time is with anyone in my life.
Yes.
And so it just makes me value it more, you know?
Well, no matter how old we get, few of us actually want to admit that we are old ourselves.
Well, I'm starting to feel a lot more willing to categorize myself as old, because, you know, I drive by a high school and I'm like, those people can't be in high school. Those are toddlers.
Yes. We always like to think that old is a label that we apply to people who are even older than us.
Yeah. And eventually there's no people left to apply it to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose we've got to come down to it then and accept it. Here's another question.
Sure.
And I got great.
Oh.
I think you're frozen.
Oh no, I'm there. So the way that I've got the screen on my system, it's got the text reversed. Could you read it to me? I was trying to read it backwards.
Yeah. This says, is your wife still a believer? And did this affect your relationship in any way?
That's a great question. So my wife is on the same path as me, and I'm very grateful for that, because I know lots of people that have gone through a journey like this and have not been on the same page as their spouse, and that's a very difficult journey. And at any given point, my wife and I aren't always exactly in the same place. I tend to be forging ahead a little bit more aggressively than she does, but both of us found the idea that we don't have to be locked into this really dogmatic Christian way of thinking and living. Being released from that was a great relief for both of us. And so I'm grateful that we're on the same page, and you know, she's less likely to sort of read, you know, Sam Harris or something like that. If she's going to sit down and read, it's going to be a fiction book that can give her some escape from toddler mom land. So every once in a while she'll check in on me, check in with me, and she'll be like, okay, so what do you think now? Because, if you read about this stuff a lot over the course of weeks and months, your views will change. And so mine have continued to evolve over time, for sure.
Yes. Do you see yourself as ever going back to a religion then?
Good question. And I've had a few people ask me that question in various forms. Like I've had a few Christian apologists ask me, what would it take in order for you to believe? And my answer to that is that, like, if you read the Bible, I look at Adam, and even after the fall, Adam had a direct conversation with God that was, I'm sure, a conversation he wouldn't wonder if it existed, and Paul on the road to Damascus had an experience that he wasn't able to deny. Thomas, when the resurrected Jesus appeared to him, asked, like, hey, can I, he needed to actually touch Jesus before he was willing to believe. So I read those stories and I go, look, if God is real, I mean, maybe it's a lot to ask, but I would prefer some sort of firsthand experience. And
yes,
and I've had people tell me, like, well, our senses are faulty. Like, would you even believe a firsthand experience? And to which I say, well, let's give it a try and see.
Yeah.
So I think some of my struggles are that, Christianity teaches that God is real and it has things to say about his nature. But all of the information that I've ever gotten about God, or the Christian God specifically, has not really been firsthand. It's been stuff that we read in the Bible that's thousands of years old, or it's been passed down to us by other believers. And so, I suppose, because I'm still open to spirituality in general, I suppose it's possible that I could end up being a believer of some kind again. I just know that there's no way that I'll end up in the same place that I was. It's like my wife and I talk about, being unplugged from the matrix, right? Like, once you're unplugged from the matrix, you can't go back in.
No.
So
what do you miss most? Because a lot of people, when they give up their religion, they're also giving up their community, their social life. Yeah. Has that hit you?
I think that there are people for which it would have hit a lot more heavily than it did for us, because I toured already so much.
Yes.
We had a really hard time locking into a specific church. So
yes.
Our community of friends has always been a lot more transient than a specific church. So we have a lot of friends who don't all go to the same church. So the church was not, like, we didn't ever have a church as sort of a hub of our community. Right. It was much more an amalgamation of all these different relationships. And so we didn't feel like our sense of community changed all that much. And I think even our friends that are Christian, we find, for a long time, we have found ourselves more drawn to Christians that were less fundamentalist or dogmatic, right? And so I think that a lot of our Christian friends are the type of Christians that would say, like, oh, this is a hard road. You have to ask your own questions, and we support you in that. So we really haven't experienced a loss of community all that much. I think for me, the biggest loss was a loss of certainty.
Yeah.
Where I really did believe that there was a God that had a plan for my life and was protecting me and was providing for me. And that also applied to my wife and my parents and my children and anyone I cared about. And that was always really comforting, but because it was something that was always there, you don't tend to think about it a lot. And it wasn't until that was removed that I realized how meaningful that had been for me. And I actually, like, when I really fully realized I don't think God is real, that caused me to go into a pretty serious, like 6-month depression.
Oh.
And really I started going to therapy, and that kind of helped me dig myself out of that. And therapy has been incredibly helpful for me in this season.
Good. So one other thing that I'm not sure where you're at is in the situation of ridicule, because
Sure.
a hard atheist might want to say all sorts of things that a Christian or a Muslim could regard as offensive. I mean,
Sure.
in other parts of the world, we still have blasphemy laws.
Yeah.
And there are still people who are in jail waiting execution because they said something or drew a picture or something that the locals regard as insulting to their God.
Right.
Now, where are you on that scale? Are you do you get pleasure out of, for example, there's what am I trying to say here? I've lost my piece of paper with my notes on.
That's okay.
There's a comedy where they poke fun of it's South Park. There's an episode of South Park where they poke fun of Christian music.
Yes. Yeah.
You only have to substitute Jesus for the word love in ordinary rock songs, and it's a Christian song.
Right. Yeah. So I think that episode.
You'll find that tender.
No, I think it's funny. But I actually thought it was funny even when I was full on a believer. I mean, there are aspects of almost anything that you can find funny, and so I think finding the humor, like for instance, like I believe there's tremendous value to the institution of marriage, and so I love being married to my wife. I'm grateful for our marriage, but we can still make fun of marriage.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And to me, that doesn't devalue, my marriage. So I look at some of these things the same way. And what's funny actually about that South Park episode is in that episode, the Christian band that they form is called Jesus Plus One.
Uh-huh.
And they were making fun of a Christian band called Plus One, who were friends of mine.
Right.
And so I loved that episode because I was like, this is hysterical, and it's making fun of people that are friends of mine. Yeah. And even the guys in the band, they thought it was funny because they're poking fun at some things that are pretty legitimate. So I think that free speech and the ability to speak freely is a fundamental idea that is valuable for us to hold on to. So I think it's really, really important, like you mentioned, the blasphemy laws and stuff like that. And I think I think that's not, countries that have laws like that, in my opinion, they're moving us in a direction of a healthier society. So I think we should be able to, within reason, say, whatever's on our minds. I think that's important. But at the same time, I don't find myself as sort of an aggressive atheist that believes that religion is fundamentally negative. I think if you look at Christianity, there's actually a lot of positive things that it's brought into the world, and so sometimes I find myself defending it strangely, even though if I find it believable so much in a literal sense. But I think it's Brett Weinstein that has this that posited this idea of metaphorical truth, and that maybe there's some things within Christianity that might not literally be true, but might be useful to believe. So he sort of coined that idea, and one of the examples that I like to bring up is money, right? So money is a shared fiction.
Yes.
And it's a $100 bill doesn't really have it doesn't have very much literal value, but because we as a society agree that it has value, it's a useful tool.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying everything about religion is like that, but I think that there are ideas that I don't want to lose. And I don't think it's exactly clear what all we would lose if we threw out religion entirely. So I still don't have very, very clear answers to exactly how that all would work, but I'm not one of these people that thinks we should just get rid of all religion all of a sudden, all at once. I definitely advocate for people to think about things more thoughtfully and more comprehensively, and to view things from other people's point of view, and to exercise compassion and tolerance and empathy. And I think that's, really important.
Absolutely. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Well, especially when you don't know which is the baby and which is the bathwater.
Yes. Anyway, we're coming to the end of our time, but I want to reveal, this is disclosure time. Sure. I want to reveal that this person here who works for Atheist Alliance International on causes like campaigning against blasphemy laws, for example. Sure. I want to reveal that I was in the church choir.
Right. Well, and I think campaigning against blasphemy laws is something that, I think most Christians would agree that getting rid of blasphemy laws is a good thing. So then you can sort of have a debate as to why getting rid of it is a good thing, right? And not everyone might see that the same way, but I would be fully with you in supporting that goal.
Yes. If a God can't defend himself from a few words, then what sort of a God is he?
Well, and I've had conversations along those lines with people recently. I've had a few people say like, well, don't you realize that you're dragging people to hell with you? And I'm just like, well, first off, the hell conversation, I don't agree with you on that one, but I also think, like, what is there to fear from questions?
Yes.
And Gene Cernan, a NASA astronaut, is credited with this quote that I love. And he said, "The truth needs no defense." And I think that's a good one. And so I look at these issues that way, and I go like, look, if someone ends up walking away from their faith because I asked a question in public, then their faith wasn't very substantial. And I hope that no matter where they end up, that they're able to walk their own journey out in a way that gets them to a healthier place than they were at, even if that takes them back to some form of spirituality. Yeah. If they're in a healthier place with regards to their own being and the way that they relate to other people, then I think that's a net benefit.
Well, my view is that humans are inherently social animals, and that we like each other and are good to each other. And what I don't like is those people who might say to somebody like you, now that you've lost God, you only did it because you want to go and rape and murder, didn't you?
Yeah, that argument doesn't make any sense. I've heard that argument a few times, and I mean, to me, it's like that's not why people walk away from Christianity. They don't walk away from Christianity because they want to murder and rape people, and they don't instantly become immoral people because they don't believe in God anymore. Actually, like most of the people that I know that have left Christianity have approached the topic of morality and spent a lot of time thinking about it. And you've got to ask the question, like, if atheists are inherently immoral, then why are so many of them active in campaigning against, human rights atrocities? Yes. And why are so many of them active in, campaigning against blasphemy laws that clearly hurt people? And quite a few prominent atheists that I'm familiar with have actually extended their ethics towards animals in a way that caused them to embrace veganism. And so you kind of got to go like, so why is it that so many atheists are obsessed with morality and trying to understand morality and walk out in a healthy way?
Yes. So what you've done is you've made it clear that we're not all baby eaters, and, and
Right.
were quite nice fellows, really. And incidentally, pretty much a large proportion of all the entertainers, actors, musicians, comedians, and so on, are non-believers. Isn't that the case?
I guess I don't know the stats on that for sure. I know that in America, a lot of public figures tend to at least give a cursory nod to God. I mean, you see this in acceptance speeches, award shows, like, I want to thank God. It's very common in the African American community here in the US because traditionally, the gospel movement is very, very intertwined with Black culture. So,
Yes.
So you see that a lot in that culture. But as even in my time as a Christian, I remember always sort of hearing things talked about as like, oh, well, so-and-so calls himself a Christian, but, we don't know what they really think, and it was always sort of said with a wink and maybe like a,
Yes.
Maybe a frown in a way, sort of like, well, we don't know,
Yeah.
But I think it's very difficult to ascertain exactly like how many people in sort of celebrity culture are believers and who aren't.
Well, we're getting some nice compliments from our, I think, largely atheistic audience here that I'm putting up at the bottom of the screen. Unfortunately, you can't read them.
I'm going to have to come up with a way to reverse this because
Yeah.
this has been a really enjoyable interview to listen to. Oh, that's nice.
It is, isn't it? We've had several of those. Yeah.
There's got to be a better way for me to read the comments. I'm going to look into that.
Get a mirror.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much. You have been fantastic. Such a lovely fellow.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. It's been our privilege. I'd like to just make a little commercial because next week I want an audience. I want to announce to them that our guest will be Richard Rawlins, who is a former president of the British Medical Association. He's a retired orthopedic surgeon, and he's going to talk to us about what's it called? Medicine that's what's it called? Fake, artificial medicine. The complementary and alternative medicine. CAP. He's going to lift the lid off that for us. So that should be good. You'd be welcome to watch from your distant venue. John, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Nice to have had you.